epicseven has finally announced the start of its 7th anniversary celebration, and Smilegate is pulling out all the stops. Whether you're a veteran or a returning player, this is the perfect time to log in, stack resources, and grab exclusive rewards. So today, let's break down everything you need to know about the 7th anniversary events, from free Moonlight summons to wallpapers, limited skins, and an upcoming stream that will actually introduce even more content. But without further ado, let's get started. If you're like me, sometimes you catch yourself spending an epicseven and immediately think, wow, I really can't believe I just did that again. Luckily, today's sponsor, AppGallery, actually helps take some of this thing out of making these purchases. Right now, if you install epicseven through AppGallery, you can get a $2 welcome coupon plus 20% cashback on every purchase you make using PayPal. The best part, it works on any Android device or emulator and not just on Huawei phones. Here's how to get it set up and start saving though. First, click on the link in the description or pinned comment. Second, download AppGallery from this link. Then install HMS Core, which you'll need to enable in-game purchases. After this, create a Huawei ID and set your region to Brazil. And finally, download epicseven through AppGallery and log into your account like normal. Once you're in game, here's how you claim the benefits. First, you'll go back to the link that we mentioned earlier. You'll click Get It Now, and then you'll receive your $2 coupon, which of course will show up as a payment option when you go to make a purchase. In regards to the 20% cashback, all you need to do is buy any item in the store using PayPal, and then a cashback coupon will be added to your AppGallery account. And with this, ML Aria will be yours. So in short, spend smarter, not harder. Click the link below, follow the steps that I've included, and enjoy the extra perks in epicseven. Thanks again to AppGallery for sponsoring today's video. So the first thing you'll see when it comes to the announced event is not just these free 100 pulls, which are absolutely ridiculous. Of course, you'll have 100 free Moonlight summons, and with this, you can pull any number of Moonlight 5 stars. However, they did also, this time around, guarantee one Light Elemental hero of the 5-star rarity, and the same can be said for the Dark Elemental category as well. Now, in addition to this, they also are guaranteeing 300 tickets alongside a bunch of other, I guess, selectors. And to be honest with you guys, at this point, the hero selectors are kind of a dime a dozen. Not to say that they aren't impactful, but in terms of what we're being given, you should just expect to have a load of 5-star selectors in general, because that appears to be the trend for most giveaways or anniversaries. With this, however, I will be making a tier list and going over some of the best selectors or the tickets to use or the characters that you should be using with said tickets. But if we move along, they're also giving us more gear and more stats, and this may feel more similar to the Dash event or some of the Origin activities from the past, where you were given basically both, I guess, equipment enhancing materials alongside equipment itself, alongside charms and other just currency in general. And alongside this, of course, we'll also be having a new buff or a quote-unquote return of a increased buff, and you're seeing, as you're seeing on screen right now, it's the rift equipment drop rate up and all these other activities that have their exp or their gains increased. However, following this, we now of course have daily quick battling and energy support, which is something that we also had in the past. With this, of course, though, that means that you'll have more pulls, or not necessarily pulls, but more attempts at using daily quick battling, which is very helpful if you're trying to clear through your activities quickly. And of course, having extra energy is also nice during events like this. Now, beyond this, we also have a week of gifts, which is pretty nice. But before we even get to that, we should make the distinction that the PV that they announced or that they showcased introduces technically 3 new characters. Now, as I mentioned, or I may have maybe suggested, this Hwayoung character is not actually a skin. Rather, this is a completely new limited summer character, which is fantastic. But in addition to this, there's not only just this Hwayoung character, which looks absolutely crazy, by the way. There's also a secondary character in the form of Aram, which is a really funny character name as well. We don't know too much about what exactly Aram is going to be doing, and honestly, at first I thought this was a Landy costume, but this is actually not the case. Now, after they showcased ARM, they also showed a Vampire Survivors-esque activity, which is super cool. However, then they also announced that the Epic Dash activity is making a return. With this, we will have a bunch of different rewards and activities as previously mentioned. Now, in terms of the Moonlight Summons event, I already covered this, but in addition to this, they also announced that in terms of the summon currency, there's going to be a new activity where you can now, I guess, use these limited summon bookmarks, so keep an eye out for this. Once we have more details and information about this, I'll clarify some more. But as I mentioned previously, basically this entire activity, or the first month of the Epic Dash or the epicseven 7th anniversary event, will have loads of currency and free events, or free rewards, basically, as you're seeing on screen right now. Now, they did also include a week of rewards, including logins. In addition to this, however, you can see that there's a coupon that you'll want to redeem now, as this will give you 6 gold transmit stones, 10 of the rare catalyst boxes, and 5 of the epic catalyst boxes, which is always nice, of course, with us always having to claim and build more characters. Now, following this, they also announced that if you play on PC, there's a PC login bonus until the 31st, and this will give you a mana selection stone, which is of course pretty decent. And if you have the capability of turning on or logging on to PC or the PC client, this is both easy and also free. Now, they did also showcase a number of new events, including the side story for Intense Tropical Days, which looks pretty cool, but of course we're really waiting to see exactly what ARAM herself is going to do before we can really make too many judgment calls. Overall, the event looks pretty cool, and of course we'll receive a bunch of free rewards. Following this, though, we were also showcased the new light Tenebria, and honestly, although her design looks absolutely amazing, as a bit of a spoiler for what we'll be talking about later in this video, I think that her kit might be a little bit interesting, but I think we'll also have to wait and see exactly how impactful her kit will be. Now, after this, we were also given a bit of the explanation and details about the E7 World Championship for 2025, and at least for what we're seeing right now, the theme of the E7 World Championship 2025 is going to be the Genesis Raz versus Light Tenebria type, I guess, like showdown, the same way that Flan and Landy had a showdown in the previous E7 World Championship. However, they also announced that there is a new OST that's being collabed with, and although I don't think this is the actual collab that I believe Smilegate hinted to or kind of suggested in the past, there are some people that are suggesting that this could be what they're talking about. I personally don't believe this is the way that they would have insinuated or wanted us to interpret the announcement of a quote-unquote collab or quote-unquote heroes from a new world, if of course the assumption here is that we're going to be having a new collaboration. But of course, I've seen a couple people also suggest that the quote-unquote new heroes from another world were the 6th anniversary or the 6th world characters, as we've seen from the past. Now, again, I don't know exactly which this is, but I do also think that the login events, including things like the Mystic Metal check-in, are super impactful. But one of the more interesting designs, or I guess introductions that they explained here, was that they're now bringing back the weekly reset, which is really nice. And if you aren't familiar with it already, one of the reasons why this is maybe not necessarily unfounded, and even if you don't agree with this, it feels like one of the things that is incredibly difficult about climbing, or even choosing to try and climb the top or the upper echelons of Arena, is that the players at the top will just farm out and, like, I don't know, like get 50,000 points, and they will never ever be touchable ever again. However, with the reset, now it makes them, I guess, closer or more down to earth and not able to scale the top of the mountain so intensely or so insanely. But of course, truth be told, this feels like something that is always going to be an issue, but they did also actually introduce a new beginners league for Arena, which is pretty cool. But of course, it should be known that the reset that I'm referring to is only for Emperor League and above, which means that if you're sitting in that champion or in that, I guess in the challenger and below sort of leagues, this isn't something that you necessarily have to care for. Now, in addition to this, they are also adding basically just sweep to the new expeditions, or I guess the existing expeditions. And with this, the idea is to reduce the fatigue involved in the content. And while that's fine, it is worth mentioning that they don't necessarily want you to only solo all of your expeditions. They do mean for you to be able to do this with other players, so they are limiting the number of times that you can solo sweep or sweep just in general. But to kind of I guess emphasize just how much of a teaser this activity is, or the stream was, they didn't really mention too much more aside from, again, these minor details about what the rewards are going to be and some, I guess, initial changes. They did also say that they've been looking more into the survey feedback, which is nice, and you should definitely be responding and reacting accordingly whenever they announce this. But now it's actually time that we talk about the new characters that are being introduced to epicseven, and that of course is both Argent Waves Hwayoung and Witch of the Mirror Tenebria, both of who are honestly amazing looking, but maybe not the most insane looking necessarily in terms of their kits. Now, to start things off, we have the new Hwayoung, and interestingly, this one is based off of the ML Hwayoung design as opposed to the normal Hwayoung design that you probably know as with her red hair and more stylistic, I guess, signature. But as you're seeing here, she has pretty high attack, she has a decent amount of crit rate, 116 base speed, and with her self imprint being crit chance, you would imagine that she's probably more focused on DPS. Now, you would be correct in assuming this, as her S2 reads that after an ally uses her S2, it activates this kick on an enemy with the highest defense, which is fine, but of course this basically makes her a single target DPS with built-in dispel, and of course, or well, I should say, with a built-in attack increase while also defense penetrating the enemy, while also providing herself with vigor and an extra turn. But in terms of how you'll get the vigor, we'll talk about that in a moment. Now, just in terms of the damage that we're seeing from this skill 2, it is worth noting that the attack does appear to do a decent amount, and as you're seeing, she is of course kicking a boss Arunka, and 12.2k is pretty impressive, to be honest, especially with the protection set from the Ilanov, and her of course having the defense penetration in general. But as you're seeing here on the S3, this is of course a team-wide AoE, which is pretty significant in terms of its damage, as you'll see in a moment. But while it's also really nice because it gives you vigor, it also increases the combat readiness of the ally in the back row by 50%, and while of course this is always going to be damage dependent, the initial showcase that we've seen thus far in terms of the animation looks amazing, but when you see the amount of damage that this deals as well, this is no slouch either. Now, again, to be clear, dealing about 12,000 damage to an Arunka is no easy feat, and in terms of the damage for the other characters, well, these are 2 evasion characters, and of course you're not going to be doing too much damage to the enemies. Now, on that note, it is worth mentioning that this is a 10 soul burn character, and of course it is just to deal more damage, but this looks like a cleave slash speed player's newest toy, so she does appear to be more damage oriented, and maybe even perhaps usable against Arunka. We'll have to see. Now, in terms of her artifact also does look pretty interesting, as this is the first ever artifact, from what I understand, that allows you to ignore damage sharing effects not built into someone's kit or built into some sort of buff, but rather just built into the artifact. And with this, thieves do have maybe one more way for them to deal a little bit more damage, especially if they don't care about survivability. But although the attack and the damage sharing is significant, I do want to remind you all that the competition that thieves have in terms of this slot are artifacts like Wind Rider, and also artifacts that provide you more damage, which is honestly pretty cool. But in terms of whether or not this is actually something that you'll be able to use over Wind Rider, we'll have to see. Now, again, to kind of showcase a bit of the damage and the way that they use this character, they do end up pairing her with a character like Conqueror Lilius, and honestly, even despite her having the vigor, it doesn't quite feel like she is the most insane character ever. It is worth noting here that if you are using the Conqueror Lilius, it could be the sort of character where you end up using something like if I'm not mistaken, Firecrow's artifact, which gives you souls. But as you're seeing here, the damage is not necessarily game changing, though again, I don't want to make too many comments about the damage dealt of a character until we actually see them with their specific stats. Now, again, I do also want to preface that in terms of the way that they showcase this character, they not only showcase the character in a cleave setup, they also showed it in a slower, I guess, turn 2 sort of style, but it's a little bit weird just because like they decided to take Elena and Elena with her non-attack ability also gives Hwayoung her attack increase. It's just overall a very unusual sort of circumstance. Again, I think it's pretty cool as of now, as an ability that can deal a load of damage and is kind of a nuke. But interestingly here, as you're seeing, though the build is likely different, this Hwayoung on the left side was not actually able to one-shot the right side Hwa. And although I understand that Hwas in general can be built with more HP or defense, since you're supposed to have the defense penetration built into the left side Hwa's kit, I'm interested in seeing how much damage this actually is, or if it's even viable to run her as a DPS, or whether or not she's just another kind of throw to the side sort of enjoyable or usable for PvE water unit. But overall, I think my initial thoughts are again that she's going to be a cleave slash speed toy, and otherwise I don't think you're likely going to be using her in this slower position, as again she doesn't feel nearly as safe as some of the other characters. Now if we swap over to the Mage Tenebria, I do want to say that Mage Tenebria has a few notable stats, and the first is that she has 120 base speed and 15 effectiveness. Now this by itself is already fine. However, if we move next to her skill 3, this is a 2 buff dispel before inflicting a team-wide or AoE block for 2 turns alongside a random debuff, and then also increasing the combat readiness of the caster by 50%. Now while I know team-wide block sounds really insane, I do want to remind you all that though this is pretty pretty impactful, this is the sort of character where it feels as though if you play characters that, number one, can't be blocked, or if you play characters that can deal damage or sleep or affect the enemy team even while they're blocked, in other words, like if you have characters that just don't need buffs or if they don't need healing, this doesn't stop them from basically acting and eliminating your team. Now I've seen a few people talk about whether or not this character could be more speed slash cleave oriented, and though I think she may be able to take the role of a tanky, maybe pseudo Angel of Light replacement, I do feel that this block is not nearly the devil that it may seem to be to other players. Now again, that's not to say that block is super impactful, but depending on what this random debuff lands as, if it's not a stun, if it's not a blind, it can feel as though some players will just one-shot you with someone like a Hwayoung's S3, or if your team is too squishy, they can inevitably just do things like counters or just take the turn and one-shot you, depending on who you end up taking here. Now it is also worth mentioning that the 50% combat readiness is nice, but as you'll see here in a moment with her S2, this is another sort of buff that, or debuff plus buff, that feels a bit weird. Now if you're curious about what Rupture does, as far as I could tell, this is a debuff that increases the total number of fixed damage that occurs after the fact, or it's kind of like a curse-esque ability where once you hit someone with this ability or that has this debuff, they take a bit more damage. However, I do want to just remind you all that a team-wide restrict alongside unbuffable and a, I guess, one random debuff may sound like a lot of control. However, if for whatever reason you get something like a slow, a restrict, and an unbuffable, and then the enemy is playing something like Death Dealer Ray, or if they have any other opener, this is not necessarily, again, going to be the most insane thing in the world. Now, I do, of course, believe that the Stealth and Barrier can be nice, however, as it's proportional to level, and as we're not necessarily sure what sort of build the Light Tenebria is going to use, I'm a bit cautious in terms of calling this character super strong or even OP. Now, in terms of her skill 1, this is another random debuff sort of attack. It is a 100% chance, however, from what I understand on S1. However, when her S3 is on cooldown, this actually triggers a dual attack from the ally with the highest attack, and with the soul burn, it grants you 1 extra turn. Now, again, I do think that this is going to be impactful for certain characters, as you can perhaps unbuffable and then do a load of damage. Maybe take someone like a Pirate Captain Flan, or take an Afternoon So Flan, or even take someone like a Spirit Eye Celine to deal more damage with their S1s. However, again, I'm not necessarily sure if this is quite to the same level as giving the team a rage buff, or if it's the same as giving the team vigor, or even doing something like providing the team with I don't know, something like the ability to kill reviving characters like with Briar, or even Lytika's bind in this case. Now again, I'm not going to make too hard calls in terms of whether or not she's going to be insane or not, but just being blunt, I'm not super impressed with the buffs that they have or that they've showcased. And even as you're seeing with the showcase for the character, though this is pretty criminal or pretty indicting in terms of how much or how valuable the actual character is, it just feels a bit weird to suggest that the character is going to be super insane when, again, there are other openers, including characters like Pyrrha and other DPS or more, I guess, DPS buffing openers that may find greater value than someone like Witch of the Mere Tenebria. Now, again, I do also want to say that in terms of the viability of some characters, we'll have to see what characters come out soon, or if ARAM or any of the new limited summer characters will also synergize well. But guys, this year's anniversary was really stacked with rewards, events, and some pretty different looking meta units, so don't miss a single day, as of course you'll miss out on tons of rewards, at least from what we've seen. But again, or rather I should say, but whether you're here just for the Moonlight Summons, the skins, or Hoarding Catalyst, epicseven really does have one of the best moments in right now in order for you to jump in and play. And as a reminder, I do want to preface that although some of these activities may not seem super impactful or super crazy relative to last year's Origin update or last year's summer update, or I guess anniversary update as a whole, it is worth mentioning again that they are holding, or that they are announcing a second follow-up stream on the 16th of August, I believe. I will fact check that and take a look at it or confirm exactly for when it is, but there's going to be a follow-up to this event, as this is the part 1. And if that ends up showing us a crazy animation train or shows us a new direction maybe in terms of how they're directing content, I'll be pretty excited. But as always, guys, that's going to be it for today. If this helped, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more E7 coverage. But with that, happy anniversary, and I'll see you all in Orbis. Stay safe, stay healthy. Good night.